Hey guys, welcome to Hope with Jonathan, and I'm your host, Jonathan Traylor, kidney transplant recipient who utilizes this story to share for other kidney warriors. And also, we share stories of hope right here on Hope with Jonathan. If you're new here, we'd love for you to hit that subscribe button. Thanks again for tuning in to the Hope with Jonathan podcast. Today, we have a very, very special guest all the way from London, England, Mr. Fez Awan. I can't wait to bring him on, guys. It's going to be an incredible interview. So I hope you guys are ready for this one. We've already got some people watching, so we're going to go ahead and chat with them really quickly and let them know how much we appreciate them for showing up to watch Hope with Jonathan tonight or this afternoon. So thanks again, guys, for showing up to watch this tonight. Again, guys, we really appreciate it. We got Kyle Hawkers from KWM in Toronto, Canada, and another Jonathan here. Got Jonathan from looking forward to this. So thank you again, Jonathan, for watching the show. Not sure where you're from, Jonathan Bartley. So thanks again for tuning in. And also, guys, we have another KWM World Kidney Day. That's right, guys. World Kidney Day. That's right, guys. Today is World Kidney Day, so it's a great day for you guys to watch this podcast. Anthony Reed from Kidney Trails, www.kidneytrails. You guys go check him out at kidneytrails.com. Dad Vice TV in the house. James Fabian. Have I heard from Mr. Kidney? I have not. I have not heard from Mr. Kidney. Mr. Kidney, where are you? Wherever you are, Mr. Kidney, we wish you well. Hope things are going good for you. I have not, James. I have not heard from Mr. Kidney. I've been wondering myself. So, but thanks again, guys, for coming in and watching this show and supporting Fez and his incredible story. Looks like Jonathan's from London. So shout out to everybody from London. Appreciate your support. Really do. Thanks again, guys. Listen, I hope you guys are doing well on this World Kidney Day. Again, guys, if you don't mind at all, go ahead and drop a comment like you're doing. Let your voice be heard. We definitely appreciate it. And thanks again for watching this live right here on Hope with Jonathan, if you haven't already. Fez is not from London. I'm going to let Fez tell where he's from. Obviously, I got that wrong. He's going to tell you guys exactly where he's from. But he is from England, I believe. So I can't wait to have him on the show and bring him on really quickly here. But remember, guys, this is not a diagnosis at all. I want you guys to definitely check with your team. As a matter of fact, really quickly here, I'm going to play this really quick disclaimer for you guys.
Jonathan is created as an informational, educational, and entertainment show. Hope with Jonathan hosts, guests, partners provide information on the basis of research and personal experiences, and is not to be taken as or implied as diagnosis of any disease or treatment. Hope with Jonathan, its host and guests and partners, recommend and encourage you to speak to your medical team before implementing any treatment or diagnosis found on this show or any product, service associated to Hope with Jonathan.
So again, guys, if you have any questions or anything that you hear on this channel, please refer to your medical team before you implement any changes at all. We're just sharing stories here. So with that out of the way, guys, listen, I hope you guys have had a chance to go ahead and take a look at what we're doing here with Hope with Jonathan. Hit that subscribe button to help us out. And again, guys, I can't wait to bring on Fez so he could share his incredible story. Thanks again, James, for his always for supporting Hope with Jonathan. James has Dad Vice TV, so go check him out over at Dad Vice TV right here on YouTube's. And again, Kyle, really appreciate your support. And again, guys, uh, we really appreciate you guys tuning in. And without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and bring on my friend, kidney advocate, organ donation ambassador. He's got an incredible story, so I'm going to let him share for most of the rest of the time of this podcast. So here we go. Without further ado, all the way from England, Fez Awan.
Everybody shake it, baby.
Hey, Fez, welcome to the show.
Hi, how you doing, Jonathan? You alright?
I'm doing good. I'm doing good. Fez, I'm sorry. I apologize. I made a mistake. I thought you were from London. So please tell us, please educate me on where you're from.
It's alright. Everyone just assumes if you're from England, you're from London. Um, I actually live in the northwest of England, close to the city of Manchester, in the county of Lancashire. So that's where I'm actually from.
Okay. Okay. Good to know. Good to know. So yeah, I had D Moore, the Diary of a Kidney Warrior podcast, and she's actually from Birmingham.
Okay.
So Birmingham here in the States is a city that is in, I believe, Alabama. So when you say Birmingham here, that's what everybody thinks. So yeah, I think it's kind of a preconceived notion that everybody from England is from London, or at least from the general area. So
Yeah.
uh, forgive me for that. Forgive me for
No,
that.
it's cool. It's alright. It happens.
So Fez, welcome to the show, and appreciate you doing the podcast with us. It's a bit late over there. What is around 10 o'clock?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's about 10 p.m. now, roughly. Just a little past. But
yeah.
yeah.
So why don't you introduce yourself a little bit? Tell us just a little bit about you, and then we'll get into your kidney disease story.
Okay, so I'm Fez. I am now 36 years young. Um, I was born with renal failure. Um, yeah, and I guess that's where it all started for me, pretty much day dot. Um, I do a lot of volunteering here in the United Kingdom, so with NHSBT, which is NHS Blood and Transplant, as an organ donation ambassador. With Kidney Research UK, I'm part of their, I'm a community ambassador for them. I'm also part of their research network. For NHS England and Improvement, I'm a peer leader, so I help and support people going through the NHS and the different pathways within the NHS. Also locally, I'm part of a group called R-Plan, which is Renal Patient-Led Advisory Network, and we help with quality control, putting the patient's points of view across to help services within the Northwest, which is where I'm based, as mentioned earlier. I also recently started with an Instagram group. Well, it initially started as an Instagram group called Chronically Brown. So that group is predominantly for South Asian community who have chronic illnesses, whatever that illness may be. And I help and support that as well, and as an ambassador.
Yeah.
So fingers in lots of pies.
Yeah, it sounds like it. I seen you have like quite a extensive list of different places that you're or ambassador for and volunteering and doing things like that. So it's really incredible what you do, and I've heard you talk and speak on Clubhouse, and so we hadn't actually ever met in person, so it was really a great thing for us to be able to actually see each other and meet each other at least virtually.
Yeah, maybe one day in person. Who knows?
Who knows? Maybe I'll get across the pond, as they say.
Yeah.
So So, Fez, you have a really interesting story. So, you were basically since childbirth, you've pretty much been suffering with kidney disease and kidney failure. Why don't you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, sure. So a lot of the early years, it's more kind of stories I've been told by my parents,
Sure.
and aunts and uncles and things that were there at the time and that can remember things that happened. Um, so yeah, I guess at the beginning I wasn't really good at keeping food down, so I was nasogastrically fed. So that's a tube up your nose down to your stomach.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I had problems urinating, so my initial diagnosis was reflux. So instead of my urine emptying like normal, the urine kept going back to my kidneys, and eventually they went kaput. So yeah, that's how that happened. Okay, the background just freaked me out a bit. Sorry. Um, yeah, so that's how that happened. Yeah, and kind of, I guess my parents were in and out of hospital with me for quite a many number of years. So when I was 3 years old, and it was actually April Fool's Day when we got the call, um, my dad initially picked up, and he thought it was a prank call, so he hung up on the hospital. Um, Fortunately, they did ring back, and this time my mother picked up, and she was like, "This is not a joke. We should take him into the hospital." So when I was 3 years old is when I received my first kidney transplant. Um, Things were good. They were all right. I did have further urine issues because of the reflux. My bladder had swollen up and become quite large. So around approximately the age of, I guess, 8, maybe even 7, I had my native kidneys removed, because it was thought that they were causing a lot of urinary tract infections.
Mm-hmm.
Also, at the time, I had to catheterize to make sure I was emptying my bladder properly, because after a couple of scans and a couple of tests, the normal way of passing urine wasn't doing the job sufficiently. So I had to start to catheterize as well, just to make sure I was emptying my bladder properly. Um,
At what age did that start?
so I probably started catheterizing 8, 9 years old, roughly, approximately.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. That's incredible, man. That's because that can be quite painful, and I'm speaking from personal experience. I remember I had a urinary tract infection that really was bad, and they wanted me to start doing the self catheterization, and even as a man, a grown man, it was quite painful for me to do that. I don't know if as a child, or maybe it wasn't painful for you, but it was quite uncomfortable to do that. So can
Um, Yeah, I mean, it's not the most comfortable thing in the world to do, admittedly.
yeah.
So the catheters I had, so initially I was doing intermittent self-catheterization, so ISC, as they kind of shortened it for me to make it
Hmm.
easier. Um, so I would do that kind of every 4 hours. So the catheters I was using, if you put them in water first, it kind of lubricated them.
Okay.
But it made it a bit easier to kind of pass, so to speak. But even with the kind of lubricant, um, it was quite painful the first couple of times.
Right.
But I knew I had to persist because otherwise I
Yeah.
would empty the urine in my bladder, and I'd get more UTIs and keep ending up in
Yeah.
hospital and so forth.
Yeah, because you have to reach the bladder. You have to go, through and go all the way to the pierce the bladder with that, and it can be quite uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think once my system got used to the catheter being passed, it wasn't as painful. It was still a little bit weird as a
Yeah.
sensation, I guess. But I guess the pain aspect of it kind of died away as my
Yeah.
system got used to having this catheter
Yeah.
pass through my body. Um, but yeah, so I had to kind of deal with that. And I guess because I was in primary school at the time, I guess that's when I kind of noticed I was different to other kids.
Yeah.
Because I didn't see no other children passing tubes to urinate. So yeah, I think
Sure.
that's when I first was like, oh, okay, no one else does this, but I do this.
Right.
So that's when, yeah, I kind of noticed, okay. there's something different with me rather than everyone else.
Yeah. And how was that? Because kids can be mean. I mean, they can be terribly mean.
They can. Admittedly, there was the name calling, and it was it wasn't very inventive name calling. Um, Also, because I had my transplant, I was on certain medications which made my hair grow quite rapidly. For a person who was kind of 8, 9 years old, saw things like Teen Wolf, for example, or Captain Caveman, that kind of stuff.
Oh wow,
Yeah.
that's terrible. So you had early facial hair and things like that already coming in.
Yeah, I mean, it was a lot more facial hair than a general normal 8, 9 year old boy would probably have, to be fair.
Right.
Um, so it was visible that I
Yeah.
had facial hair,
Yeah.
and that was due to medications. And I had much bushier eyebrows at the time as well. So yeah, it kind
Yeah.
of made me stick out a bit visually, as well as having to kind of leave class to catheterize and having to use the staff bathroom as opposed to the student bathroom. So all these kind of things the other kids would, notice.
Yeah.
Um, there was at a point when I wasn't intermittently doing it, but I had to have the bag at the same time, so it was continuously draining. Um, so carrying that around in school, again, also not the greatest thing.
Right.
Um, so yeah, there were a few things here and there. I guess thinking back on it now, it seems a lot bigger in my head when I kind of think about, oh yeah, I did that and I did that and I did that and I went through this. But at the time, I just went with it.
Yeah.
It kind of didn't really process at the time. I guess now I'm a bit older and I can process these things. And I was like, yeah, that was kind of okay. That was what bullying was, and this is the effects afterwards. And I still think about it now and again. Um, but yeah, I mean, it is what it is. It was what it was. Um,
Yeah.
and I'm not in that position anymore. And it's at this age now, it's normal to have facial hair, so I'm good. Um,
Yeah.
so yeah,
Uh, so you eventually ended up though in complete renal failure, and you had to have a transplant. At what age did you have your first transplant?
so I had my first transplant when I was 3.
Wow,
Yeah,
3 years old.
yeah.
Yeah. So I imagine, yeah, your parents had to kind of help tell you exactly what was going on, unless you don't remember that at 3 years old, do you?
No. So again, as mentioned earlier, I don't remember it.
Yeah.
So it's mainly a lot of stories my parents have told me and the elders that were around at the time.
Was it a? I'm guessing it was a pediatric size, a child's kidney, or was it an
I do
adult?
believe so.
Okay.
I believe it was a child who passed away. Yeah.
Yeah. And then, did you had to experience dialysis at that age as well?
So I believe I was on dialysis, but for a very short time before we got the call. So it may have been like a month or so,
Yeah.
potentially 2. Um, but yeah, it wasn't for very long. And I guess I was very fortunate in that sense, that we did receive the call when we received it. And thankfully, my mom picked up the second time because my dad thought it was a prank the first time.
Oh,
So that
yeah,
was
that's
very
amazing.
helpful.
So I'm assuming that was probably hemodialysis that you did as a child, maybe.
No, so
No.
it was peritoneal, so
Okay.
PD. So I think they had inserted the catheter, and I probably did a month or so of exchanges at home. I was also still getting nasogastrically fed, so I didn't actually eat solid food till I had my first transplant. So the first 3 years, pretty much of my life, everything was tube fed, and all measured out and kind of fluid restricted and very balanced. Um, so yeah, a lot of the heavy lifting in the early days was done by my parents, to be fair. So I'm very grateful for that, because without them, I potentially would not be here.
What did they define your kidney failure was from? What disease, or what? I mean, was it just because you were born with some genetic issues, or was there what was
Um,
it? What was the disease?
so it was due to reflux.
To the reflux.
Yeah.
Yeah. So basically because of the reflux, but there was nothing. So because of that, what was there any sort of like you know something down there that it wasn't developed quite properly? Did they ever figure that out, or
So everything was developed. Um, so the issue was at the point of my bladder where the urine would release, there was extra, I guess, tissue.
uh huh?
Um, so people generally would urinate normally, but because I had these extra pieces of tissue, the urine wouldn't release.
Mm-hmm.
So it had no way of leaving my system. And if there was no way of exiting, it just went back to the kidneys and it
Yeah,
just kept this vicious cycle. And
yeah,
that's how my kidneys got damaged to the point where they pretty much failed.
yeah. Okay, thanks for explaining that to us because I've heard of reflux and things like that, but I wasn't exactly sure if maybe there was like a blockage down there or some sort of
Yeah, I mean, I guess the extra bits of tissue, so to speak, um, I guess was a growth that shouldn't be there. I mean, they did try to operate when I was very, very young, probably a couple of weeks old. Um, but the surgeon's hands were too big and I was too tiny. So they couldn't rectify the issue. Um,
wow.
so yeah, it was little things like that,
Yeah,
or big things, depending on which way you look at it. Um, that kind of caused it to get worse and worse and worse. And they tried other things. But unfortunately, none of them were kind of successful, really, to be honest. And it
yeah.
eventually just made my kidneys kaput.
So you had the first transplant. How long did that transplant last you?
So that transplant lasted about 10 years. So I was in high school at the time. Um, yeah, so I was about 13, roughly, maybe 12, 13 approximately. And I started to feel a bit unwell. Um, and because I had a bit of a track record with UTIs, we just assumed it was another UTI, to be honest. Went to the hospital, kind of said, look, he's not feeling too great. By now, I had collected many traveler miles with the hospital, and they kind of knew me and my family quite well. Um, and at first, they thought it was a UTI also.
Hmm.
But then when they did some blood work and they found out certain results, creatinine and GFR and things like that, they had quite drastically changed. Um, and they thought obviously it was a bit more serious. I ended up having a biopsy. Um, I ended up staying in longer than I thought I was going to stay in. And they were like, yeah, this kidney's kind of on its way out and he may have to have dialysis, which I ended up having to have. Um, so because previously when I was very, very young, I didn't have PD for very long. So I was fortunate enough that I could still have PD this time.
Hmm.
So yeah, I started PD. Um, Initially, I started doing exchanges, but very short time because it was impractical. Taking kind of the equipment into school and doing all
Oh,
that stuff.
sure.
Yeah, so
Uh,
very quickly.
and then back to teenage years and adolescence and puberty and so it probably how did it affect you as far as a teenage and and starting to notice changes in your body and opposite sex and all that stuff? I mean, was there an issue with that type of stuff?
I mean, I don't have a great track record with the opposite sex generally.
Right.
I was more concentrating on being healthy and staying alive,
Yeah.
and
Oh,
just being
totally.
as healthy as possible. Um, but yeah, I guess it was very strange because I would miss a lot of schooling. Um, and this was during my kind of secondary exams, so during GCSE years. Um, Initially, as mentioned, I was doing exchanges at first, but this was impractical. So my parents and myself had a chat with our renal team, and they told us about APD, so automated peritoneal dialysis.
Mm-hmm.
And I started doing automated peritoneal dialysis. Um, and I guess that worked out better for me. So even though I was doing like 12 hours a night, um, for 6 nights a week, um, so I would go onto the machine kind of 7 p.m. So I would be ready to get off the machine at 7 a.m. to be ready to go to school. Um, so if there were like social events, if friends were meeting up for birthdays, if friends were going to the cinema, if they were just going out to play footy, even, um, I wouldn't go. Mainly because I probably didn't have the energy, to be honest. Because
Yeah.
it was completely like it just drains you, as you probably know.
Yeah.
But also because
Absolutely.
I had to be connected to a machine, so
Yeah.
um, I missed a lot of the social aspect, I guess. Um, which is it is what it is. It sucked at the time. It wasn't great. Um, but I also think it helped me get into my other hobbies, which I really enjoy, like comic books. Um, so yeah, I mean, pros and cons, I guess. I didn't get to hang out with people, but I
Yeah.
escaped in other ways, via comic books and other things like that.
So, how long did you have to continue with peritoneal dialysis, or at nighttime, until you got your second transplant?
So I was probably on peritoneal dialysis in one form or another for about 2 years approximately.
Hmm.
Um, During that time, because it was affecting my schooling so much, my father volunteered to be a live donor to myself. So
Oh.
he was also going through the process of the live donation process,
Hmm.
whilst I was still dialyzing. Um, and then, yeah, we kind of got the okay and the clear that my dad is okay to be, a donor. And a date
Hmm.
was set, and we kind of had a target of getting a second transplant from my father.
That's awesome. That is beautiful. That your father stepped up to do that, and be your donor. That's incredible. And he was a match.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it proved he was my dad. But yeah, he was a match, thankfully.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, that was great.
Yeah.
And I'm forever grateful for that opportunity. Um, but yeah, so I received my second transplant, um, in the year 2000, on Star Wars Day. So that will be my Millennium Transplant forevermore.
Oh,
Um,
cool. That's cool.
yeah.
That's really
Um,
cool.
so yeah, that's when I received my father's kidney. Um, so I
And
guess,
you thrived with that transplant for a good while.
um, it was a bit shaky to begin with, to be honest. So the first maybe 12 to 18 months were quite shaky. Um, I had a few episodes of rejection, which were counteracted by changing my medicines, giving me IV drugs. Um, I also ended up getting meningitis.
Mm.
Um, I also ended up getting encephalitis. I also ended up getting CMV.
Oh man.
So it wasn't the easiest of rides. And again, this was kind of GCSE years. So, and because I had missed so much schooling, um, there was a point where I was literally going to examinations with cannulas in my hand because I had to go straight back to the hospital for more treatment.
Sure.
Um, so examinations didn't go very well either, to be honest. Um, but yeah, I guess it affected my schooling quite badly, which is something I kind of regret, but I guess also something I can't really change. I did as much as I could with the circumstances I was dealt with. Um, so yeah, the first kind of 12 months, 18 months weren't the easiest ride, so to speak.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, it wasn't all plain sailing, unfortunately.
And then you ultimately ended up facing rejection again. And what year was that?
Oh wow. So I probably had my dad's transplant about 12 years. So by this time I'd finished college. I did well enough to get into college, thankfully. Um, Finished college, did quite well in college. Had a few UTIs throughout that. But again, by this point, I had got quite used to having UTIs. So in the grand scheme of things, it wasn't a massive kind of burden, I guess. It still caused issues, and I still had to, have antibiotics, and it still would sting when I pee, etc.
Oh yeah.
Um, but I had been through worse things by then.
Yeah.
So yeah, I enrolled into university. I went to do, more education. And
When,
during the second year of university, I started to feel unwell. It initially started with just like sniffles and a bit of a cough.
yeah.
And I thought it'll pass in a bit, it'll be okay. I mean, I knew I was kind of immune suppressed anyway, so I'm going to pick things up as it is. And I just thought it was just a lingering cough or a bit of a cold. And it'll last a bit longer for me, but it'll be fine. It won't be
Yeah.
a problem. Um, I was terribly wrong. um, it lasted much longer. It got much worse. I ended up getting cramps. I was exiting out of all holes. I wasn't keeping food down. I was missing lectures. Um, it got to the point where my housemates rang my parents, and they were like, "He's really not well. Um, and maybe you should come and check on him just to see, if he's okay or if there's something that needs to be done." Um, I was younger then, and I was kind of, I don't know, I guess a young man in it, wanted to kind of prove that I can do this by myself. I can have that independence and live with this illness and be okay.
Sure.
Um, I guess we all learn lessons in life. My parents did turn up at the door. They told me I looked very pale, almost like a Simpsons character. Um, I think when you hear that from your parents, you might be in a little bit of trouble.
Yeah.
Uh,
Absolutely.
they ended up taking me to my hospital that I was under at the time. Again, blood tests, urine tests, etc. were done. My creatinine had shot up to just under 1,000, so it was like 900 and something. My GFR had plummeted quite rapidly, quite low. I was admitted. I was given emergency hemodialysis this time with a shunt in my femoral, in my leg. I was on IV antibiotics, and I was admitted for quite a few weeks, maybe 2, maybe 3. And in essence, they basically said the function that has been lost can unfortunately not be regained. And the remaining function that you do have will slowly reduce to a point where you will need dialysis again and you will need a third transplant again.
Yeah.
So in 2013, I was preemptively put back on the transplant list.
Okay.
So being from an ethnic minority, already having 2 transplants, finding a donor match was going to be fairly difficult.
Yeah.
So generally here, ethnic patients tend to wait approximately a year longer than their Caucasian counterparts.
Sure.
I had the extra complications of already having 2 transplants, so my antibody count was quite high.
If you don't
Um,
mind, Fez, would you share your lineage or?
sure, yeah. So my parents are from Pakistan,
Okay.
and I was born and raised here in England,
Okay.
in the northwest, in God's great country of Lancashire.
Uh huh.
Um, so yeah, that's my lineage, I guess.
Okay. That's
Yeah.
great. I just didn't want to keep people guessing of what you know what I mean. So I was glad
I
that
mean,
you
we
were
could have turned it
sharing.
into a game and see if someone commented and got it right. Then.
We
I
could
mean,
have
we could
done
have
that.
messed with people for a bit.
We could have
Um,
done that.
but yeah, so
You
generally,
if
ethnic.
and let me ask you this real quick. So when you went through you had to do the emergency dialysis with a shunt in your leg. When you left hospital and you said preemptively you were put on the transplant list, were you did you immediately go back to the peritoneal dialysis for home treatment?
No, so what initially happened is they managed to salvage some of the function.
Uh huh.
So I wasn't at the point of needing dialysis.
Okay.
The shunt itself could only stay in a week because of infection control risks,
Right.
because of where it was.
Makes sense.
Um, I was still on IV medications, so like the second week slash third week, I've honestly, that part of my life is a little bit fuzzy. Um,
Oh, it's understandable.
Mainly because A, it was a long time ago, and B, so much stuff happened so quickly.
Exactly.
Um, but yeah, it was either 2 weeks or 3 weeks I was admitted.
Yeah.
But the emergency dialysis itself probably lasted a week, so maybe I had 4 sessions potentially. But the IV medication would carry on. Um, but yeah, at the end of that, they kind of said the function that you have remaining will keep you going for a little while longer, but it will eventually kind of decrease to the point where you are going to need dialysis again, and you are going to need a third transplant again. Um, and because of my ethnicity and because of my other complications of being transplanted twice, I was preemptively put back on the transplant list even before I had started dialysis, um, because they knew it was going to be quite a bit of a wait for myself.
Sure. And did antibodies play a role because of the other transplant lost?
Yeah, so that was one of the other factors that, kind of had to be put into consideration when preemptively putting me back on the list, because I had quite a high antibody count. Um, from, I guess, the transplants, but also all the other things I had been through in my life.
Yeah.
My antibody count was quite high. Um, so it seemed like a very sensible, logical idea to preemptively put me back on the list. Um,
Absolutely. Yeah. So you ended up eventually the second transplant obviously ended up failing eventually, like they had told you or warned you that that was going to eventually happen. And you, so at that point, you were able to receive a third transplant. Why don't you tell us a little bit about that?
yeah. So before the third transplant, I did actually end up going back on dialysis.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I guess 2014, maybe
Mm-hmm.
2015. So initially, again, this time it was hemodialysis. So I had a fistula created. Um, and initially, I was going in center, but that really didn't last very long. Um, I was probably at the time one of the youngest patients turning up to do my dialysis.
Yeah.
It kind of felt a little bit alienating. Everyone always already kind of had their kind of group that they chatted to and got along with, and here came this young guy, um,
Right.
who was kind of on their patch, so to speak.
Yeah.
Um, and it was just strange. And I was young and I wanted to do stuff. And because I had left uni and I hadn't officially qualified and I'd left early, um, I got into quite a dark kind of way of thinking of what am I going to do with my life now.
Sure.
Um, and I really wasn't sure. I kind of turned into a hermit, really. I wouldn't talk to people. I really wouldn't go out that much. I would stay
Mm-hmm.
in bed quite a lot. Um, and
Yeah, in center can be sort of depressing,
yeah,
especially when I kind of faced the same thing because I was one of the youngest patients in my center as well, and the morale in there was really low. And most of the patients had already just given up and accepted that this was their life and this was how things were. And I started thinking differently, and I had other thoughts that there's got to be a better way to do this. And so I really didn't want to accept it anymore, and I did home hemo as well. So I'm guessing that you ended up moving back to home dialysis as well.
yeah, so that's what eventually happened. So again, had a word with my renal team who were really supportive. At this point, I was in adults now. Um, and yeah, they were really supportive with it. They kind of understood that I was still quite young. I still wanted to do things, and I still wanted to have that quality of life. And
Sure.
because our co-production worked really well with the staff and myself and having those conversations, um,
Mhm.
I ended up training to be a home dialysis patient. So I went through all that procedure, kind of learning about the machine, how to use it safely, how to place my needles safely, how to remove them safely, what to do in an emergency, God forbid, if something did happen. Um, so yeah, I guess my training was about 6 weeks in total. I think like the first 2 weeks, to be honest, I probably slept through
Yeah.
because my body was still adjusting to dialysis itself. Um, on the way back on taxis and stuff, I would just fall asleep. But
Wow.
yeah, so the first couple of weeks, I probably didn't even process much information I was getting told. Um, but yeah, then I ended up at home. And then I started researching and learning about nocturnal dialysis and how that could be even better for myself and to improve my quality of life.
Hmm.
This is when I also started volunteering a lot in different kind of organizations. Initially as a youth worker, so I got my youth work qualifications. So that kind of put my mind at ease that okay, I've got that at least. I'm
Yeah.
able to do that, and that's a field of work I can go into.
Right.
Um, but then, yeah, I started doing nocturnal. Unfortunately, my fistula failed, so I ended up with a CVC line, so a central venous catheter in my neck here. Um, and I probably did nocturnal for about 4 years, maybe. It was coming up to, I think, about 5 years. So I'd gotten into a routine. My quality of life was as good as I could possibly make it. My blood results at this point were I was told as good as a transplant patient. So maybe I don't need to dialyze as many hours. But I was like, cool. If it's doing its job, let's carry on. I'm just sleeping anyway.
Right.
Um, and then in July 2020, so during the pandemic, I got the phone call from a hospital to say there's a potential third kidney available.
Uh-huh.
Um, I didn't actually know that the transplant system had started to roll on again because we were in a pandemic. I thought it was still closed down, but evidently not. And I was very fortunate. In towards the end of July 2020 is when I received my third transplant, which I affectionately call my pandemic transplant.
That's awesome. That's amazing. Yeah, I was transplanted in August of 2020. So I sort of experienced the not in the height of COVID, but it was a few months later, and I basically had to go in the hospital by myself. My wife was I had to leave her at the front entrance. They let her come in a little bit, and then they said you can't go any further, and I
Right.
had to go in there and do everything by myself. It was quite interesting, but I was going to go through it no matter what. Alone with a lot of people, it didn't matter. I wanted to get the transplant. So, and I wasn't scared about COVID at all. I said, no, I'm going to go ahead and do it. Some patients were really nervous, I think, about that aspect of being transplanted during that time. But the risk or the reward far was greater than the risk, I believe.
Yeah. So obviously, I was tested before my transplant to make sure I was negative regarding
Yeah.
COVID,
Yeah.
um, and so was the donor. Um, But yeah, everything was explained. The ward that they had started the process on again was strictly just for transplant patients,
Hmm.
so obviously no visitors, etc.
Right.
And they were very kind of strict with that, um, to the point if my family wanted to bring anything, and it would be quite a journey because I lived like an hour, maybe slightly more in traffic away from where the transplant was happening, the
Hmm.
hospital where it was happening.
Hmm.
Um, it would have been a bit of a trek for them to come constantly. But we communicated via Zoom and things like that. So it kind of helped. And I guess because I was an adult, I kind of had my own kind of like Netflix and things like that. So I had enough stuff to kind of keep me occupied.
Sure.
Um,
Sure.
yeah, it was strange. It was weird. I was already isolating anyway, before the transplant, and then
Right.
afterwards, after the transplant, they were like, you're going to need to isolate, and I was like, that's
I
not a
mean,
problem. I've already been doing it.
yeah.
Um,
Right. So you're already used to that, and then in recovery anyway, they're giving you like pain medication and you're nodding out for a couple of hours and you're coming back, and you're in and out. So you wouldn't be any good to any guest anyway. So it wouldn't really matter if anyone was
Yeah.
in the room. So with the pain medications and stuff that they give you. Um,
Mm.
so so I noticed you're really active, and you talked about you started volunteering. Why are you so passionate? Obviously, your story, but what makes you so passionate about being involved with all of this advocacy that you're involved in?
I just want to help other people more than anything else. Um, there is the aspect of it of trying to, fight health inequalities for communities um, that are more ethnically challenged, let's say. Um, but yeah, I think trying to get equality and um, just making sure people don't have to kind of suffer and not be knowledgeable in their journeys when it comes to kidney illness or kidney disease. To know that there is support out there, there are people out there that have had similar journeys, um, and to help and support them through, whether that be young people like myself who started very young, and help them through, whether it's the transitional phase of being from pediatrics to adults, like I've been through that process as well, um, to all sorts of patients, really. But especially with ethnic minorities, I think we do need to talk about it more. We do need more awareness about it in our communities to make it less of a taboo subject to talk about. Um, because kidney disease does not discriminate regardless of your gender or your race or your sexuality or whatever. Um, if you're going to suffer, you're going to suffer. Um,
Yes.
and try and promote, I guess, prevention as well. So through education, try and get people to prevent their function, to getting to the point where they have to start going on this merry-go-round of dialysis, transplant, dialysis, transplant. Um,
Yeah.
I think also educating the general public as well that transplant is not a cure. It's probably the best form of treatment that we can get, but it's not a cure. It's called a chronic illness for a reason because it's chronic and it's for our lives. Um, so getting people to accept that and kind of learn those basic things is a massive help to the chronic community, um, and especially with people from ethnic minorities who just generally need to have that conversation a lot more.
No, I agree with you totally. I mean, we need so much awareness for not only kidney disease, but organ donation as well, and fair treatment of patients across the board, regardless of ethnicity and sexual orientation, all that stuff. We just need to be fair across the board on all of that. And I applaud you for everything that you're doing. You're pretty active in the social media arena with like Clubhouse. I hear you on Clubhouse. I get to hear you on Clubhouse.
Yeah,
So I I do think that it's an amazing thing. You have an incredible story and history with kidney disease and kidney failure. I mean, you're a kidney fighter, and you got a lot of fight in you, Feds.
thank you very much, Jonathan.
It's been an incredible podcast, a lot of great information shared. I really appreciate everybody that showed up tonight and supported us or this afternoon for Fez. It's getting pretty late, so I don't want to keep him too long. Really appreciate Jonathan Bartley. He said he's from London, so thank you, Jonathan, for supporting the show tonight. And Kyle Hockridge is sending you a message on behalf of all those kidney disease and kidney failure on this World Kidney Day 2022. Thank you both for the work that you do and the time you put in, straight from the heart. Bless you both. Thank you very much, Kyle.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And thanks, Jonathan from London, for turning up. We know each other. I should
Okay.
probably say that. But yeah, he's a very, very dear friend of mine.
Cool.
And I love him very much, platonically. But
Well,
yeah,
that's great. Support is crucial when you're battling a
yeah,
chronic illness, and whether you're a dialysis patient or even a kidney transplant. Like you said, kidney transplant doesn't mean that it's over. Like, oh, the disease is over. It's a treatment. It's a treatment for this, and Fez is he's a testament of what can happen. And you've really been blessed, with the you've been able to get three kidney transplants, which is amazing. So the good Lord above still has a plan for you, Fez. Obviously.
I hope so. I hope it's a good plan.
Well, it is because you're utilizing your story for the greater good. And
Yeah,
obviously, you said you just want to help people, which is
yeah.
amazing. Any shout outs you want to give before we end our podcast?
Jonathan, thank you for turning up. I think peer support is very important also. We haven't had a chance to talk about that, but I think having a group of friends or fellow patients or even carers, that you can learn so much from carers as well. It's amazing to have these groups of people get in touch, keep in touch, because I noticed, for me at least, when I went through these highlights of failure and then waiting for transplant and dialysis, a lot of your peer group tend to disappear because you're out of sight, you're out of mind.
Right.
Whether that have been in high school or university or college, etc. For myself,
Mhm.
so people like Jonathan, people like Hilaria, who has commented, she's commented under her group name, which is WSH Kidney Network. Um, so people like that, and Kyle as well, and yourself, who I keep in touch with on Clubhouse. Um, it's great to have a community of peers that I can talk to, whether it be here in the United Kingdom, and now it's even bleeding across the pond to the United States. I've even met a couple of, I'm not met, but I've talked to a couple of patients in Holland as well. So it's amazing, like meeting all these people who have this illness. Um, and it's a great support for me, but I also in turn want to be a great support for them. Um, and I guess that's why I do it. And it's important, I think, to have that peer group to support and lean on and kind of talk to when no one else really understands, but other patients get it. Like you can talk about something really random and everyone else will be like, "What are you on about?" But other people will get it. Like I could have a conversation about catheterization with Jonathan, he would understand what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Whereas if it was another friend from my street, they'd be like, "Yeah, I don't know what you're talking about. It's gross. Let's not talk about that."
Exactly. No, it's great to find that common bond and be able to share that with someone that understands what you're going through. And you're right. Like if you mention having to self catheterize or dialysis, people they don't get it. They just don't grasp that. So it's amazing that you have those kind of friends, and I really appreciate you doing the show, man.
Thank you
Again,
for having me.
no, it's an honor. It's an honor to have you, and I look forward to doing more things like this with you. And where can people find you if they want to find you?
Oh wow. Okay. So on Instagram and on Facebook, it's Awan. Um, I'm not that hard to find. On Twitter, it's at Fezzy. So it's Fez with a Y at the end. Um, so yeah, it's not difficult. Um, I would also, before we do leave, say please have the conversation with your loved ones and your family regarding organ donation. Please make them aware of your wishes, whatever your wishes may be. So they are respected at the end of the day when it comes to the day of your passing. So please have those conversations, whether you start with your family. You may want to do it in places of education if you feel comfortable or at work, etc. But please definitely start having those conversations regarding organ donation.
Absolutely, I totally agree. And I think on that note, we're gonna close out the show, and let that be the final statement of the show. Is have those conversations before you make those plans and have those conversations with your loved ones. And definitely sign up to be a donor. You can do that at donatelife.net. That's for here, I believe, in the states. It may not. I don't think that's worldwide. Is there a website, maybe possibly in the UK, that supports organ donation you want to share?
I believe it's Organ Donation UK. I
Okay.
believe. I can Google it quickly.
Well,
Don't know it by heart. It's like 10 o'clock at night, to be totally honest. So
yeah, I got you. I got you.
it's organdonation.nhs.uk.
Okay. Thank you very
Close.
much. Thanks for sharing that with us, and thanks again for being on the show. Hey guys, really appreciate all the support. Y'all take care. God bless. Take care of your kidneys.
Thank you very much.
Oh, here it is.